all life.
All life stems
Yeah.
from a common
That was
single-celled organism.
that was Darwin's view. That it was micro steps.
I see. Okay.
Little teeny steps. Macroevolution is that for some reason, because of change in climate or whatever, that all of a sudden you had a huge jump. In other words, it wasn't that a bird, one kind of bird, it gradually developed this, and you know what I'm saying, because and then it survived.
That's why you mentioned the
survival of the
Cambrian
fittest.
explosion.
What's that?
That's why you meant the Cambrian explosion. The Cambrian.
The Cambrian
That's why you
explosion
mentioned that, because
is a
okay.
big example of it. But macroevolution followed microevolution because microevolution didn't work. They just, there was too many places where all of a sudden something appeared, and there was no reason for it to appear. There was no sequence you could see. You know, they talk about the missing link. Well,
which is interesting because it's not just one missing link.
oh, yeah, exactly.
It's billions of hypothesized common ancestors, and they've never once found a single common ancestor.
Yeah, and that's the problem with microevolution, is you can't find those millions of links, and so they come up with the idea of giant things, and really the reason for it was because things changed so much that for some reason you had these great jumps, but they have no reason why they can explain that. It's almost like a Markianism, that came before evolution. So either way you look at it, the problem is that it doesn't answer the question. And the whole purpose of evolution is to say, how can we explain what we have if you take God out of the picture?
So do you then believe in evolution within a species? Do you believe in small
change within a species?
I would say,
well,
I personally believe that there is substantial evidence that's used today, especially in the process of medicine, that a species, when introduced to a selecting factor, certain traits are more likely to get passed on, and varying circumstances can lead to one species of bird being unable to successfully interbreed with another species of bird.
That's true. There are frogs in northern United States that can interbreed with ones in Kentucky, but cannot breed with ones in Georgia, but the ones in Georgia can interbreed with the ones in Kentucky. I believe. See, the thing is, the Bible says after its own kind. What's kind? That doesn't necessarily mean species. So I believe in change. We know that. Just out there we have two dogs, totally different, and we breed them. But there's also in that, when we breed that, there's some selected by a person that does that.
I don't think the idea of natural selection is random, because Darwin's theory of natural selection could only go so far before other scientists had to say, oh, well, natural selection doesn't explain everything. So what about genetic drift, when random traits are selected for and no one can explain why those traits survive? Or you have non-random mating, and it's like, oh, well, shouldn't everything be completely random? Oh, but some are being chosen for. One thing I find interesting is that one of the very definitions in evolution says that a species will not act for the best interest of the species, that it goes against living creatures' nature, just that a species will act according to instincts, but it will never do actions for the sake of the species. And then you introduce human life, and evolution can't, by that definition and a bunch of other things in evolution, it cannot explain morality.
Well, no, it can't. Another thing it cannot understand, all of life is based on information. DNA, RNA, whatever. To me, that's important, because it comes back to the idea of a creator. Because if everything is based on on information, it's more logical that an informer did it than a chance did it. You know, how God does it, the Bible doesn't say. I believe in change. You'd have to be blind not to. Everything's, you know, you see change. But I also believe that the Bible doesn't contradict that. But I'm not saying I believe in evolution. What I'm saying is I believe in change. You've got 100 different kinds of dogs. You've got all sorts of kinds of birds. But I don't believe we all came from a one-cell animal, and that we, you know, I don't believe that we come from the apes. I believe that man, it says of man is put out separate from everything else. It says, and God took of the dust of the earth, breathed his spirit into them, and man became a living soul. Then again, you're not told how to do that. So I think man is a special creation of God's. But as far as go back to the original question, yes, I believe in dinosaurs. One of the reasons I cannot believe in the young earth is more astrophysics. You know, we know the speed of light in a vacuum, and it's unchanging. Now, theoretically, at the Big Bang, it could have been faster as things began and then slowed down. But if it's going on for, you know, because we're you know, our Hall of Man's history is just a blink compared to the whole thing. But we know when there was an explosion of a sun or a sunlit nova in the Magellan Cloud, and we saw it, we know because of the speed of light and the red shift, we know how long ago that took. And it's millions of years. Now, how can the earth be 7,000 or 10,000 years old if that star exploded a million years ago? Either the speed of light has changed drastically, number one, or number two, that never happened and God just put it in the, how would you say it, he's fooling us. It never really happened. Or God created the light. You know, to me that speaks against God, because it's saying God is deceptive. So you know, there's no way I cannot believe the earth is millions of years old, at least millions, but more from that alone. Evolution, paleontology in that doesn't convince me, because there's too many things that are, you know.
I find it interesting that in paleontology, specifically through a process they call stratigraphy, where they date the fossils, that not just dating the fossils, but dating the layers of the earth that would have contained certain fossils. They use the half-life. But see, maybe I don't know, but like the half-life for carbon is 5,700 years. I don't know that anyone ever took the time to count out how long carbon decays. Also,
sure
exponential. Have they?
Yeah.
You think for 5,000 years they studied the decay?
Well, they figured all those things out mathematically.
It's extrapolation.
That's what computers are for.
True, but I don't know. Like I'm not discounting it
see,
because I'm not smart enough for that, but it does seem a little odd to me that we're using
part of the problem comes is they do double talk. Mm-hmm. They'll say these two things are found in the same strata, and therefore we know that this must be so old. It's carbon, you know, the carbon dating or whatever. But then they say we know that carbon true is because it's in the same stage, and so they're making a statement that since A is here and B is here, A must be true because B is true, B must be true because A is true. Mm-hmm. And too often they found, whenever they find something that doesn't fit, they kind of ignore it.
Or they write a new assumption to work it in, which is why I'm an engineer and not really a scientist, because I think that these kinds of assumptions, oh, well, let's assume B is true, so that way if A equals B, then A can also be true. It works great if you're building stuff.
When I was in college and we had some pictures of folks demonstrating evolution, one was the horse. And it showed a picture of a little teeny horse here, a little bit bigger one, a little bit bigger one, into the modern day horse. What they didn't tell you was these were not chronological. Some of the smaller ones were actually later than some of the bigger ones. But they organized them, look at, or another was ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. With the idea that as you see the development of the fetus, it shows you the development. One time we had gills and everything. At the bottom of that picture, it said, in the underneath it says, this is no longer considered true. But if you didn't read the footnote under the picture, you would believe that that's what we believe. And so they're deceptive in the way they do it often. They put things together to try to show something that it really doesn't show. I remember that book very clear, those two issues. Another one, you take the hand of a man, the flipper of a whale, has the same bone structure. The problem is, let's see which way that is. You know, having the development of the embryo, you have a stage of the blastula where you have epidermis, mesodermis, and endodermis. In the whale, the structure of the bones comes from the endodermis, I believe, or maybe the mesodermis. And in man, it comes from one of the others, from the thing. That blows everything away.
Over 50 years ago,
because
so details are a bit fuzzy.
If they develop from a common source, then they should both be in the same layer of the egg, and they're not. That tells me it has much more to do with design than it does with evolution. I believe in intelligent design. That God designed it. How he did it's his business.